We're going to start talking about data structures. And basically, data structures are ways or means for programming languages to organize and store data. The main data structures that I would like to discuss first in Python are tuples, lists, and dictionaries. And let's start with tuples. Tuples are container types that are unchangeable. In other words, we can't change the values that they hold without changing the object itself. And they can contain a collection of objects that don't necessarily have to be the same type. A tuple is a sequence type as well, and is used considerably because it uses less memory than other data objects. Let me give you a few examples. Let me create an object A, and let's say that that object contains the first element, or the first object, A. And the convention for tuples is first that we use parentheses, and then the objects that are held inside are the objects, a collection of objects that create the tuple. Now, these don't have to be the same type, so I could say 10, and I could say true, which is a Boolean type, and now these A value, this A holds a tuple. So if we just want to do type A, we can see that this is a tuple. Now, when I say that these parentheses are the convention, really what I'm trying to say is that this is not necessarily something that we need to have in order to create a tuple. So for example, I can do B is equal to A, 10, and true, and that actually is a tuple. So in other words, what creates a tuple is just the comma, the separation of the objects using a comma as opposed to the parenthesis itself. But generally, this is a notation to use to create a tuple. Now, one thing to know is that tuples are sequences of objects, and they have their own indexing. So for example, in the object A here, the first object, if I use brackets to denote the indexing, is the string A. And I can do all sorts of slicing with these indices. I can, for example, use, let's say, A to denote, let's say, the third element here. I can use also slicing. For example, I can say, let's say, from the first element to just the second element without including that, and that's again a tuple. The one thing to note is that these objects here, the tuple is not changeable. It's an immutable type of object. So in other words, if I want to change the first object, let's say from an A to a B, then what that means is that I can't really do this way. Let's say the first element, and I want to change that to a B. This is going to create an exception because it says that the tuple object does not support item assignment. In other words, it's not changeable. A nice something important about tuples is that we can iterate them. They are iterable objects. In other words, if I say, let's say, let me create a tuple with 5 elements, and I want to do for element in A, and I want to print the element. What that will allow me to do is that this object tuple is iterable. In other words, I can access every element in a for loop or something like that. Okay, so those are the most important aspects or concepts on tuples. The next data structure object that I would like to cover are lists, and lists are mutable or changeable objects, and they are iterable as well. The lists are generally created with square brackets, and let me give you an example. Let's say L1, and I want to put some numbers in here, and I am going to separate each value with a comma, but I'm going to have them created within brackets. And if I want to take a look at the type of object that this is, we can see that this is actually a list. Lists, like I mentioned before, are indexable or have indexes that start at 0. So if I want to do L1 0, I can see that the first object is 3, and I can do also slicing. For example, I can say I want to show the element from 0 to 2, and that will show the 3 and 45 here. So with, in other words, the element 1 and element 2 without including the last one. I can also create a list with different type of objects. So for example, let me create one that contains string, and I'll let's say another string here. Let's say I say 630, and let me put a number in here, 630, an integer. I can create an object that contains a tuple inside. So let's say 20, let's say 20 and 22. And I want to create, let's say, another object that is another list within this list. And that's also possible. So we can see that I can include any type of objects inside. So in other words, if I want to look at the fourth object, and let me just print this here, you can see that this is a tuple that is being held within a list. And I can also check the type of L2, the fourth element, and I can see that inside I have a tuple. There are one of the things that makes lists different than tuples is that this list here is mutable. In other words, I have the first object is string, and the string is thanks. I can change this L2 object, the first element. I can change this to, let's say, thank you, and I can see now that the object L2 now has changed the first element from let's say thanks to thank you. So it's a mutable object, and there's more implications in terms of the memory address. Naturally, lists are going to hold more space in the hard drive than tuples, but they are very helpful. Lists and tuples both have constructors. The constructor for list is a list. So these constructor, what that means is that I can pass a tuple. Let's say I have the tuple A10 and true, and I can pass this to the constructor for list, and what that's going to do is change that to be a list. And on the other hand, if I have, let's say, a list that contains the same values, let's say 10 and true, and I want to change that to be a tuple, I can pass that to the constructor, which is tuple. And again, that changes these lists inside to be a tuple. Okay. So again, important to note that mutable are objects that the individual objects inside can be changed. The next data object is a dictionary. Dictionary is an unordered, changeable collection of data values, and it holds key value pairs. And when I say unordered, is because once you create a list, it doesn't. The list is the dictionary is generally unordered. It doesn't retain the order that you place when you construct it. Let me give you a few examples. Let's say I want to create my dictionary 1, and in that one I want to create, let's say, a key. Let's say it's a name. Generally, the creation of dictionaries is constructed with squarely brackets. So the first element in here is the key. We separate that with a column, and then we put the value. the key doesn't have to be a string, it can be anything, and also the value can be anything as well. So let's say team in 18, that's key value pair, let's say Charlie, and let's suppose these are ages 12. I can do, let's say, Tiffany, and let me say 22, and let me say Robert, and I can put here 25. And if I check the type of this value D1, I can see that this is a dictionary. This here is a constructor also for the dictionary type. I can extract an item directly with the key, so that's one of the differences in dictionaries opposed to lists and tuples, is that I want to, let's say I want to do D1 and I want to extract the value, let's say the age for Robert. So what I would have to just write is D1 Robert, and that returns the value. I can always update a dictionary with methods that are built in. So for example, if I take a look at the methods that are attached, the methods and attributes that are attached to a dictionary, you can see that there are many methods in there, like clear, copy, get items, update. And update is the one that I want to show you how to take a look, work. So I can do D1 update, and what that does is it can update, let's say, an item key value pair. Let's say I want to update the team with 20, and what that will do, let's see what the error is. I have to put this key value pairs within squarely brackets. So I can see that now team has been updated to 20. So again, one thing to note is that the order of the values is not guaranteed. So it's an ordered set of numbers and key value pairs. The other thing that I want to mention is that I can extract just the values by using, again, if you see these attribute here, d1 dot values, I can extract just the values in here. And again, you can see that this is a method. So these are the values here, just the ages. So that's an important part of dictionaries.